Daniel Carter looked out the viewport as the shuttle descended toward the Varaxian capital city. The alien architecture rose in sweeping spires of blue-gray metal, gleaming in the light of a distant orange sun. After 8 years as a Marine, this was his strangest assignment yet. "First time off-world, Sergeant?" Captain Lisa Ford asked, noticing his expression. "Yes, Mom," Daniel replied, his eyes still fixed on the alien landscape below. "Never thought I'd be guarding scientists on another planet." Captain Ford smiled. "This isn't just any diplomatic mission. Earth needs this alliance. Those Varaxians have technology we've only dreamed about." Daniel nodded and adjusted his uniform. At 32, he had seen combat on 3 continents, but nothing had prepared him for the 8-foot-tall aliens with their 4 arms and scaled skin. He had studied their culture extensively during the 3-month journey aboard the transport ship. The Varaxians respected strength and honor above all else. They had conquered 3 nearby star systems before discovering Earth. The shuttle landed with a soft bump. Daniel checked his sidearm out of habit, though he knew weapons would be limited during the diplomatic meetings. "Remember," Captain Ford said to the security team, "we're here to protect our people, not start a war. The scientists and diplomats go wherever they need to. We keep them safe, stay alert, and keep our mouths shut." The team of 12 Marines nodded in unison. When the shuttle door opened, Daniel got his first real look at a Varaxian. The alien guard stood nearly 9 feet tall, with dark green scales and eyes that glowed amber. All 4 of its hands held ceremonial weapons. The human delegation filed out of the shuttle. Daniel was assigned to the science team. 5 brilliant minds who would study Varaxian technology and biology. Among them was a woman who caught his attention immediately. Dr. Olivia Grant stepped carefully down the ramp, her brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Unlike the other scientists who stared openly at the aliens, she surveyed the landing area with practiced calm. Her eyes met Daniel's for a brief moment, and he felt a strange connection, as though she was assessing him just as carefully as he was assessing the potential threats. "Sergeant Carter," Captain Ford called, "you'll be primary security for Dr. Grant's team. The xenobiology lab is separate from the main diplomatic area." Daniel nodded and approached the scientist. "Dr. Grant, I'm Sergeant Carter. I'll be handling your security while you're here." Olivia smiled, but Daniel noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, Sergeant. I hope it won't be too much trouble." Over the next few days, Daniel followed Olivia through a series of meetings with Varaxian scientists. He noticed small things that seemed odd. She never showed surprise at Varaxian customs. When a high-ranking Varaxian official entered a room, she instinctively knew the proper greeting, sometimes before the human diplomats did. One evening, as they returned to the human quarters, Daniel finally asked, "Have you worked with aliens before, Dr. Grant?" Olivia hesitated. "No, this is my first contact mission." "Why do you ask?" "You seem comfortable here. Most of the team is still jumping when the Varaxians make those throat-clicking sounds." She laughed softly. "I studied their cultural briefings very thoroughly." She paused at the door to her quarters. "I'm a quick learner, Sergeant. It's why they sent me." Daniel nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Dr. Olivia Grant than a brilliant scientist. As he took his position outside her door for the night shift, he wondered what secrets she might be hiding, never imagining that beneath her simple lab coat was the heir to Earth's entire government. Princess Ileana Caldwell herself. 2 weeks into the diplomatic mission, Daniel found himself spending most of his waking hours with Olivia. The Varaxian science complex was vast, and she had been granted special access to their biology labs. This meant Daniel was always by her side, standing guard while she worked. "Could you hand me that scanner?" Olivia asked, not looking up from the alien tissue sample she was studying. Daniel passed her the device. "You know, most of the other scientists have their Varaxian counterparts do the handling. I prefer to do things myself," she said with a small smile. "Less chance of miscommunication." Daniel watched as she efficiently operated the alien equipment, Most humans struggled with the four-handed design of Varaxian technology, but Olivia had adapted quickly. "The war chief approaches," whispered one of the Varaxian lab assistants. Everyone in the room straightened as the door slid open. War Chief Zorax, the second highest military leader in the Varaxian Empire, ducked his massive frame through the doorway. His upper arms held ceremonial weapons, while his lower arms remained clasped in what Daniel had learned was a gesture of peace. Daniel moved closer to Olivia, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. Zorax noticed this and made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The human protector has good instincts," Zorax said, his voice deep and rumbling through the translator. "You honor your duty." "Thank you, War Chief," Daniel replied with a respectful nod. To Daniel's surprise, Olivia stepped forward and made a complex greeting gesture with her hands. It was a formal Varaxian military acknowledgement that Daniel had only seen in the advanced cultural briefings. "Great War Chief Zorax, your presence honors our humble work," she said. Zorax's amber eyes widened slightly. "You know our warrior's greeting well, human scientist." Olivia maintained her composure. "I believe in thorough preparation." The meeting continued, with Zorax expressing interest in human biology. Throughout the conversation, Daniel noticed the war chief treating Olivia with unusual respect for a mere scientist. When they finally left the lab hours later, Daniel could no longer contain his curiosity. "Where did you learn that greeting?" "It wasn't in the basic briefing materials." Olivia hesitated before answering. "I had access to some additional cultural information. Before joining this mission, I worked briefly with diplomatic staff who served Princess Eliana." "The princess herself." Daniel was impressed. "No wonder you move through these meetings like you've done this before." "The diplomatic corps has excellent training programs," she said, quickly changing the subject. "What about you, Sergeant? How did you end up on this mission?" Daniel shrugged. 8 years in the Marines, 3 combat tours on Earth. When they asked for volunteers for the first alien diplomatic security detail, I signed up. Figured it would be more interesting than another peacekeeping mission. That evening, the human delegation was invited to a Varaxian cultural demonstration. Daniel stood behind Olivia in the grand hall as warriors performed combat rituals. The display was impressive. 4 armed soldiers moving with unexpected grace, their weapons creating patterns in the air. "They're showing us their strength," Daniel whispered to Olivia, "making sure we understand what we're dealing with." Olivia nodded. "It's not just a threat display. They're honoring us by showing their skills." "How can you tell?" "Look at the Emperor," she said quietly, nodding toward the massive throne where the Varaxian ruler sat. "He's displaying all 4 palms when the warriors finish each sequence. It's a sign of approval for both the warriors and for us as witnesses." Daniel stared at her. "You really did study those diplomatic materials thoroughly." Olivia's eyes met his, and for a moment, her mask seemed to slip. When your life depends on understanding another culture, you pay attention to details. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Olivia Grant was much more than she appeared to be. 3 weeks into the mission, Daniel noticed a change in the atmosphere of the Varaxian palace. The guards seemed tenser, and twice he caught alien servants watching Olivia from the shadows. One night, as he escorted Olivia back to her quarters after a late research session, a tall figure stepped out from a side corridor. Daniel immediately stepped between Olivia and the potential threat, his hand moving to his weapon. "Peace, human warrior," said the Varaxian, raising all 4 hands. Daniel recognized him as Kelnar, one of the Emperor's advisors. "I must speak with your scientist. It is important." Daniel didn't move. "Whatever you need to say can be said to both of us." Kelnar's eyes shifted to Olivia, who nodded slightly to Daniel. He reluctantly stepped aside but remained close. "Not all welcome this new friendship between our peoples," Kelnar said in a low voice. "War Prince Krazek believes humans are weak. He thinks an alliance dishonors our empire." Olivia's expression remained calm. "Has he spoken against us to the Emperor?" "Not openly," Kelnar replied. but he gathers supporters among the younger warriors. I tell you this because—" he hesitated, "because I believe this alliance benefits both our worlds." After Kelmar left, Daniel escorted Olivia the rest of the way to her quarters in silence. At her door, she finally spoke. "We need to tell Captain Ford." Daniel shook his head. "I already reported similar concerns last week." She said the diplomats don't want security interfering with delicate negotiations by raising alarms. Olivia's eyes flashed with sudden anger. "That's foolish. Ignoring threats doesn't make them disappear." "You sound more like a security officer than a scientist," Daniel said. Her expression softened. "I've seen good plans fail because people ignored warning signs." The next morning, Daniel found Olivia waiting outside his quarters before his shift began. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I've been thinking about Krazek. We need to learn more about him and his supporters." Over the next few days, they developed their own intelligence operation. While Olivia worked in the labs, she listened to the Varaxian scientists. Daniel spoke with the guards who seemed most friendly to humans. They met each evening to share what they had learned. "Krazek is the Emperor's nephew," Daniel told her as they sat in a quiet corner of the human quarters. "He expected to be named successor, but rumor says the Emperor is considering a different path." Olivia nodded. The scientists mentioned that Krazek believes an alliance with Earth would weaken their empire. "He thinks we should be conquered, not befriended." "Classic warmonger," Daniel said. "But we're no threat to them. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." "It's not about actual threat," Olivia replied. "It's about maintaining a system that puts warriors at the top. Peace might elevate scientists and merchants in their society." Daniel looked at her with growing respect. "You understand politics better than most military officers I know." She looked away. "Just applying what I've learned about cultural systems." Later that night, after Olivia had retired to her quarters, Daniel was approached by his captain. "You've been spending a lot of time with Dr. Grant," Captain Ford said. "Just doing my job, ma'am." "Is that all it is?" Ford asked with a knowing look. Daniel felt his face grow warm. "She's easy to talk to. Smart. Notices things others miss." Ford's expression turned serious. "Be careful, Carter. There's something odd about her assignment here. Her security clearance is higher than mine, and I can't access her complete personnel file." "What are you suggesting?" Daniel asked. "I'm not suggesting anything," Ford replied. "Just keep your eyes open. And watch her back. I've heard whispers about this War Prince Krazek too. If trouble's coming, it might head her way first." As Daniel took his position outside Olivia's door for the night, he wondered once again who she really was, and why a xenobiologist would have security clearance higher than a Marine captain's. A month into the mission, Daniel and Olivia had settled into a comfortable routine. Each morning, he would escort her to the labs. Each evening, they would share a meal and discuss the day's events. Despite the growing tension among the Varaxians, Daniel found himself looking forward to these quiet moments together. One night, as they walked through the garden area set aside for humans, Olivia seemed troubled. "Is everything all right?" Daniel asked. Olivia stopped beside a fountain that sprayed water in patterns meant to mimic Earth rainfall. "Have you ever wanted to be someone else? Just for a while?" Daniel thought about this. "When I was younger, maybe. I grew up in a group home in Detroit. No parents, no real family. I used to imagine I was someone important." Olivia turned to him, genuine surprise on her face. "You never mentioned that before." "Not something I usually talk about," he said, shrugging. "The Marines became my family. First place, I felt like I belonged. And now they've sent you millions of miles from home to guard scientists on an alien planet," she said with a small smile. "Just one scientist, these days," he replied, returning her smile. For a moment, something changed in Olivia's expression. She opened her mouth as if to say something important, then closed it again. "Daniel, An urgent beeping from her communication device interrupted her. She checked the message and her face paled. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Emergency meeting. The ambassador needs all science team leaders immediately. They hurried to the main diplomatic hall. Inside, the human ambassador stood at the center of a group of worried-looking officials. Captain Ford nodded to Daniel as they entered. Good, you're here, the ambassador said when he spotted Olivia. The Varaxian Emperor has agreed to the technology exchange treaty. Everyone in the room broke into smiles and congratulations, but the ambassador raised his hand for silence. There's one condition. He will only sign it in the presence of Earth's highest authority. A heavy silence fell over the room. He wants the president to come here. Someone asked. The ambassador shook his head. The president is just a temporary leader in their eyes. The emperor wants someone from Earth's ruling bloodline. He paused, looking uncomfortable. He's requesting Princess Eliana Caldwell. Daniel heard Olivia's sharp intake of breath beside him. Is that possible? Captain Ford asked. Having the princess travel here would be a security nightmare. It's already been approved, the ambassador replied. Her ship will arrive in 3 days. Chaos erupted as security officers began arguing about protection protocols. In the confusion, Daniel noticed Olivia slip quietly from the room. Concerned, he followed her. He found her in her quarters, frantically packing equipment into cases. She jumped when he knocked on the open door. Going somewhere? He asked. I need to prepare my research for the princess's arrival, she said too quickly. She'll want to see everything we've discovered. Daniel stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. No one runs like that to pack research notes. What's really going on, Olivia? If you're in some kind of trouble, I can help. She stared at him for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. She walked to her desk, pressed her thumb against a hidden scanner, and removed a small device. When she activated it, a soft hum filled the room. Privacy field, she explained. No one can hear us now. Daniel watched as she stood straighter, her posture changing subtly. When she spoke again, her voice had a new, commanding quality he had never heard before. My name is not Olivia Grant. It's Eliana Caldwell. Princess Eliana Caldwell. And in 3 days, I'm supposed to arrive here to meet myself. Daniel stared at Olivia. No, Princess Eliana, in stunned silence. 1,000 small details suddenly made sense. Her knowledge of diplomacy, her careful speech, her high security clearance. I came here undercover to see the Varaxians firsthand, she explained. My advisors only showed me filtered reports. I needed to know the truth before committing Earth to an alliance. Does anyone else know? Daniel finally asked. Only the ambassador and Earth's Security Council, she replied. And now you. Daniel ran a hand through his short hair. So what happens in 3 days when you're supposed to arrive? The official story will be that Princess Eliana's ship was delayed. The ambassador will stall for time while we figure out how to handle this. She looked at him with worried eyes. I need you to keep this secret. If the Varaxians discover this deception, they might see it as a grave insult. I'll guard your secret with my life, Daniel said without hesitation. But what about Captain Ford's suspicions? Keep her focused on regular security protocols for now. She's expecting a princess to arrive, so that will keep her busy. The next morning, Daniel accompanied Eliana to a meeting with the ambassador. Inside the ambassador's secure office, they discussed the situation. The emperor knows something, the ambassador said. He specifically requested a private ceremony with limited attendees. Eliana paced the room. He's testing us. Varaxians respect strength but despise deception. If I reveal myself now, he might view it as honest strategy rather than trickery. Or he might execute our entire delegation, the ambassador countered. As they argued, Daniel noticed a small shadow move beneath the door. Someone was listening. He silently motioned to Eliana, who nodded and continued speaking as if nothing was wrong. Daniel moved quietly to the door and yanked it open. No one was there, but the corridor wasn't empty. A Varaxian servant stood at the far end, moving too casually to be innocent. That evening, Daniel increased security around Ileana's quarters. He briefed his most trusted team members about potential threats without revealing her identity. Princess Ileana's ship will be arriving soon, he told them. Until then, Dr. Grant's protection is our highest priority. Her research is vital to the treaty. The next 2 days passed in tense preparation. Ileana continued her laboratory work as if nothing had changed, but Daniel noticed her checking exits and security positions with practiced eyes. On the evening before the princess was scheduled to arrive, the Varaxian Emperor invited the entire human delegation to a formal reception. The Great Hall was filled with warriors and dignitaries from across the Empire. "This is unusual," Ileana whispered to Daniel as they entered. "Normally, the welcome ceremony would happen after my arrival, not before." The Emperor sat on a massive throne at the far end of the hall. War Prince Krazek stood at his right side, his 4 arms decorated with ceremonial armor. "I don't like this," Daniel said quietly. As they approached the throne, Daniel scanned the crowd. Several younger warriors were positioned throughout the room, their hands close to their weapons. He moved closer to Ileana, his body angled to shield her. The Emperor rose as they approached. His deep voice boomed through the hall. "Tomorrow, Earth sends its princess to us," he announced. "Tonight, we honor our human guests with a display of Varaxian tradition." At his signal, warriors began a complex ceremonial dance with spears and blades. Daniel kept his eyes moving between the performers and the crowd. Something felt wrong. The performance reached its climax. The warriors formed 2 lines facing each other, their ceremonial spears raised to create an arch. The Emperor gestured for the human delegation to walk between them. As Ileana stepped forward, Daniel noticed War Prince Krazek make a subtle hand signal. In the same instant, he saw a warrior grip his spear differently from the others. The warrior's eyes locked directly on Ileana. Daniel knew in that moment what was about to happen. Time seemed to slow as Daniel watched the warrior grip his ceremonial spear. Years of combat training took over in an instant. He noticed the spear tip gleaming with an unusual blue substance. Poison. The Emperor was still speaking, inviting the human delegation to walk the path of honor. The ambassador stepped forward first, followed by Ileana. As they passed between the rows of warriors, Daniel kept his eyes fixed on the suspicious guard. The warrior's muscles tensed, preparing to strike. "Get down," Daniel shouted, lunging forward just as the warrior thrust his spear toward Ileana's back. Daniel threw himself between the princess and the poisoned weapon. The spear pierced his chest with a sickening impact, but he managed to push Ileana clear of the attack. Chaos erupted in the Great Hall. Marines drew weapons as Varaxian guards moved to protect the Emperor. Through the haze of pain, Daniel saw War Prince Krazek shouting orders, pretending to help restore order while actually directing his supporters. "Daniel." Ileana's voice seemed far away as she knelt beside him. The poison was already spreading, burning through his veins like fire. Captain Ford appeared beside them, weapon drawn. "We need to move. Now." 2 Marines lifted Daniel, while others formed a protective circle around Ileana. They began a fighting retreat toward the exit. "The spear," Daniel gasped through the pain. "It's poisoned." "We'll get you to the medical bay," Ileana said, her voice steady despite the panic in her eyes. The pain was becoming unbearable. Daniel's vision blurred, but he fought to stay conscious. He had to make sure Ileana reached safety. They made it to the human medical area, where the Earth doctors immediately began treatment. Daniel heard frantic voices discussing antidotes and poison extraction, but they seemed to be coming from underwater. "Our medicines won't work," a doctor said. "This is an unknown Varaxian toxin." Through the fog of pain, Daniel saw Ileana step forward. Her posture changed completely as she addressed the room. "I am Princess Ileana Caldwell of Earth," she announced to the shocked medical staff. "This man saved my life. Do whatever it takes to save his." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting in confusion. Captain Ford stared at Ileana in disbelief. "Secure all communications," Ileana ordered. "No one speaks of my identity until I give permission." As doctors worked desperately to stabilize him, Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness. The poison felt like it was eating him from the inside. Each breath became more difficult than the last. He woke later to find Ileana still at his side, arguing with the doctor. "Earth medicine can't help him," the doctor was saying. "The poison is designed to attack human biology specifically." "Then we need Varaxian medicine," Ileana replied. The doctor looked skeptical. "After what just happened, they tried to kill you." "Not all of them," Ileana said firmly. The Emperor did not know of Krazek's plan. Despite the medical team's objections, Ileana left Daniel's side. He wanted to call after her, to tell her not to risk herself, but he couldn't form the words. Time passed strangely as Daniel fought the poison. He had moments of clarity followed by periods of burning agony. In one lucid moment, he opened his eyes to see Ileana had returned, accompanied by a massive Varaxian wearing the robes of a healer. "The Emperor sends his personal physician," Ileana explained, taking Daniel's hand. "War Prince Krazek and the warrior who attacked us have been arrested for treason against the Empire." The Varaxian healer approached, carrying strange instruments. "The poison is called death sleep," the healer explained in halting English. "It is forbidden in our laws. Your humans saved the princess from certain death." Daniel tried to smile but couldn't. His heart was beating irregularly now, each pulse sending waves of pain through his body. "He will die without treatment," the healer said simply. "I can help, but the process will cause great pain, and I cannot promise success." "Do it," Ileana commanded, still holding Daniel's hand. "I won't let him die for me." Daniel floated between life and death for 3 days. The Varaxian healer worked tirelessly, applying strange medicines and using devices that glowed with alien energy. Throughout it all, Ileana refused to leave his side, even as her advisors begged her to return to the safety of the Earth ship that had arrived in orbit. "My place is here," she told Captain Ford, who had become her reluctant ally. "He took that spear for me. I won't abandon him now." On the 4th day, Daniel's fever finally broke. He opened his eyes to find Ileana asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hand still holding his. She looked different now, her hair arranged in the formal style he had seen in pictures of the princess, her simple scientist's clothes replaced by the elegant uniform of Earth's royal house. He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The small movement was enough to wake Ileana, who immediately called for water and the doctors. "You're still here," Daniel managed to say after taking a small sip. "Of course I am," she replied with a tired smile. "Someone had to make sure you didn't die heroically." The human doctor examined Daniel while explaining what had happened. "The Varaxian antidote neutralized most of the poison, but you'll need time to fully recover. You've been unconscious for days." "The diplomatic situation," Daniel began, trying to sit up. "Lie still," Ileana ordered gently. "The situation has changed considerably while you've been healing." After the doctor left, she explained everything. War Prince Krazek and his co-conspirators had been tried for treason against the Varaxian Empire. The Emperor himself had decreed that an attack during a ceremonial offering of peace was the highest dishonor possible. "Krazek and the warrior who threw the spear have been executed," Ileana said. "The others involved have been banished from the Empire." "And what about your cover being blown?" Daniel asked. Ileana's expression turned thoughtful. "That's the strange part. The Emperor wasn't angry at all. He said he suspected from our first meeting that I wasn't a simple scientist." She smiled slightly. "Apparently, I don't behave like someone who takes orders from others." A week later, Daniel was able to stand and walk short distances. The Varaxian healer had warned that the poison would leave lasting effects, occasional pain, sensitivity to cold, and scars that would never fully heal. But he was alive, which was more than anyone had expected. On the day Daniel was released from the medical bay, the Emperor requested his presence in the Great Hall. Ileana helped him dress in a formal marine uniform that had been sent from Earth. "Are you sure you're strong enough for this?" she asked as they walked slowly through the corridors of the palace. "No," Daniel admitted with a weak smile, "but I wouldn't miss it." The Great Hall had been transformed. Where before it had been arranged for combat displays, now it was set for a formal ceremony. The Emperor sat on his throne, but the steps leading up to it had been modified to accommodate Daniel's weakened state. When they entered, every Varaxian warrior in the room, hundreds of them, placed a fist over their heart in a salute that Daniel had never seen them offer to any human before. "Sergeant Daniel Carter," the Emperor's voice boomed across the hall. "You have done what no human has ever done. You have shown the true warrior's virtue, willing sacrifice for another." Daniel stood as straight as his healing body would allow. Ileana remained at his side, no longer pretending to be anyone but herself. "In the history of our empire," the Emperor continued, "only 7 beings have been named Shield Brother to the Emperor. All were Varaxians of the highest warrior caste." He paused, his amber eyes fixed on Daniel. "Today, you will be the 8th, and the first human." The crowd of warriors made a sound like rolling thunder, a sign of approval that Daniel could feel in his bones. The Emperor rose and extended all 4 of his hands. "Step forward, Shield Brother, and take your place in Varaxian history." 6 months passed. The Earth-Varaxian alliance grew stronger with each passing day. Trade ships moved between the planets, and scientific teams from both worlds shared discoveries that benefited everyone. Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the Varaxian capital city. His uniform now bore the special insignia of Shield Brother to the Emperor, a position that gave him unique status among both humans and Varaxians. The wound in his chest had healed, though it still ached during cold nights. The Varaxian healer had been right. He would carry the marks of the poison forever. "There you are," Ileana said, joining him on the balcony. "The signing ceremony begins in an hour." Today was the final step in the alliance, a formal treaty that would bind Earth and the Varaxian Empire together for generations. Daniel had played a key role in drafting the security protocols, ensuring both worlds would be protected. "Nervous?" he asked. Ileana smiled. "A little. This is what I came here for in the first place, though I never imagined how it would happen." Much had changed between them since that day in the Great Hall. Daniel's new status had raised questions about his future. As Shield Brother to the Emperor, he was expected to remain on the Varaxian homeworld. But as a Marine, his duty was to Earth. "Have you decided?" Ileana asked quietly. They had discussed this many times over the past months. "Yes," Daniel said. "I've accepted the position as Earth's military liaison to the Varaxian Empire. Commander Ford, will handle the regular security teams. I'll work directly with the Emperor's warriors." Relief showed on Ileana's face. "I was afraid you might choose to return to Earth." Daniel turned to face her. Since the day he had taken the poisoned spear, something had been growing between them. Something neither had put into words yet. "My home is where I can do the most good," he said, "and where the people I care about are." The ceremony was held in the same great hall where Daniel had nearly died. Now it was filled with representatives from both worlds. The Emperor sat on his throne with Daniel standing at his right side in the position of honor. Ileana led the Earth delegation, her royal uniform gleaming with medals and honors. As the treaty was read in both languages, Daniel caught Ileana's eye across the room. They had come so far from those first days when she was pretending to be a simple scientist and he was just a Marine guard. After the signing was complete, the Emperor rose to address the gathered crowd. "This treaty marks a new chapter for both our worlds," he said through the translator. "But alliances between planets are made stronger by ties between people." He gestured to Daniel. "When this human warrior threw himself before a poisoned spear to save another, he showed the highest virtue our culture recognizes. In Varaxian tradition, when one saves another from certain death, they gain a claim to that person's life and future." A murmur ran through the crowd. Daniel looked at Ileana in surprise. This was not part of the planned ceremony. The Emperor continued. Princess Ileana Caldwell of Earth, Shield brother Daniel Carter saved your life at risk of his own. By our oldest laws, your fate is now bound to his. Ileana stepped forward, a smile playing at her lips. The people of Earth have a similar tradition, Emperor. We believe that when someone is willing to die for you, they have shown the greatest love possible. She walked across the hall to stand before Daniel. On Earth, when two people wish to bind their lives together, they exchange promises of loyalty and care. Daniel's heart beat faster as he realized what was happening. Ileana took his hand in full view of both delegations. Daniel Carter, once my protector and now my equal, will you accept my promise to stand with you for all our days to come? Daniel looked into her eyes, seeing not a princess, but the woman he had come to love. I will, he said simply. As they sealed their promise with a kiss, applause erupted from the human delegation, and the Varaxian warriors pounded their weapons against the floor in approval. The alliance between worlds was now bound by something stronger than treaties or politics, the unbreakable bond between two people who had faced death together and chosen life.